All right. I hear that we're live, so we'll go ahead and get started. Well, hi everyone. I'm Shauna Medell, Storyraise's VP of Creative Studio, and I want to welcome you to this session of Storyraise Boost, a fast-track virtual learning series that'll go through the end of the year. For those who don't know, Storyraise is a solution for organizations to create personalized digital reports and videos. With the digital report, you can increase engagement with your donors and ultimately raise more funds. If you're interested in seeing a sample of a personalized digital report made for your own nonprofit, you can click the link in the chat and our report generator will make one for you. Now, today we'll be chatting about how to achieve one-on-one donor engagement at scale for nonprofits. Personalized donor engagement used to be a nice to have, right? But now it's a must for donor communications. It's very complex, it's very demanding, and I'm sure a lot of the folks who are joining this webinar, likely a mix of nonprofit leaders in donor engagement, stewardship, and communications, each of you plays a very powerful role in the donor experience. And that's why we've invited two experts to share their expertise with you. We have Carly Berna from Virtuous and Linda English from Dirty Freehub. They're ready to share their insights and advice to help you modernize your stewardship and also to maintain strong connections with your donors. So Carly and Linda, you ready to get started?
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
All right, ready to roll. Let's do a quick round of introductions. Carly, why don't you kick us off, and then we'll toss it to Linda.
Yeah, awesome. I'm Carly. I'm the VP of Marketing at Virtuous, also the fundraiser in residence because I previously worked 10 years in the nonprofit space where I was the Chief Marketing Officer at a nonprofit in Phoenix. I was also a Virtuous customer for 7 years, so I joined Virtuous 2 years ago, and Virtuous is a modern fundraising platform from CRM to online giving to AI donor assistance, all with the goal of deepening donor relationships with less wasted time. So we talk a lot about scaling personalized communication, so this should be a good conversation.
Okay. I am Linda English. I am both the founder and executive director of an organization called Dirty Freehub, which is all about cycling. We are specifically about a niche of cycling called gravel cycling. And gravel cycling is a relatively new sport. It's been around probably for about the last 10, 15 years. And we create gravel bike routes across the Western United States. Why do we care about this? Well, first off, we want to get people outside and riding bikes. And probably areas that they would never, ever think to ride. So a lot of rural areas. Secondly, we want to make sure that we are supporting small towns across the Western United States. So we can go in and turn a really teeny tiny town like Paisley, Oregon, into a travel destination. We do that through what we call as drip tourism, meaning that we're not doing big events. Instead, we're creating gravel route guides for people then to go out and ride that then on their own or with their friends. We also do a lot of education in our route guides. It can be education on logging, farming, wildlife impact. We do a lot of history things. And so at the end of the day, how we're measuring our successes, did we get people outside? Did we connect them to where they're riding? Did we provide a good economic return for these small, tiny towns that are really struggling? And then finally, the fourth one, which is a little bit trickier, is a lot of our cyclists are what we call city slickers. They're coming from big towns and they're going out to a rural area. And right now, we feel like our country is very, very divided. And so by having cyclists going out and visiting these areas, we're hoping to sort of disrupt that division if we can in any way.
Beautiful. Thank you both. So let's dive in. I have a two-part question to kick us off. If you could first start off by telling our viewers what has changed the most in regards to what donors expect from nonprofit communications from your own perspective, and then given all of that change, what tactics or approaches now feel outdated just from what you've seen, what other people are using, and what do we need to stay away from because it just feels outdated now?
Mm-hmm. I guess I'll start. I feel like donors are so used to personal communications, right? We live in this world with Netflix and Amazon and Spotify, and everything is given to us is personalized and based on our own behaviors. And so what we used to think of as personalized, which said, dear, insert personalized name, is no longer personalized enough. It needs to be very personal. And donors who give to a nonprofit give because they have a personal relationship with that nonprofit. They're giving for a reason, and they're expecting that nonprofit to have that same relationship back and understand why they give, what the purpose is, what their communication preferences are, all of that. So what's outdated is kind of generic spray and pray communications that you send to everyone. Again, that like dear friend, dear insert personal name, anything that's just like mass communication, because they're really expecting that personal communication that they're getting from all the companies that they engage with outside of nonprofits.
Yeah, great answer. Linda?
Wow, I couldn't agree more on some of what Carly is talking about. One of the things that I would like to talk a little bit about is funding sources have really changed, and that does change the impact to your donors. So what we've seen happen is across a lot of different types of nonprofits, the government funding just like went away, right? Just adios. And so what that did is created a lot of really what I call these desperate nonprofits. Everybody is sending out communication saying, okay, we're going to go under if we don't get funding. We're going to, and so I feel like that the space has gotten really noisy. So if you're a donor, and let's talk specifically about individual donors, because we have a couple of different types of individual donors. But if you're an individual donor, you're getting so much messaging now. And it's just like over and over and over. You have to give to this or this, blah, 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 blah. And so I think in order to break through that noise, you have to be so much more, I call it authentic, meaning that you've got to really think about how your communications are going out. What's the messaging and how are you keeping these people engaged? For us, it used to be, we could get donations from people that were like barely knew us, right? They didn't really know us. Now it feels like we do a lot of webinars, we do a lot of volunteer opportunities. We implemented a process where when we're doing a webinar, you register ahead of time. We're asking you questions. Afterwards, we're sending you messaging out. Now we know that all of those people are interested in that particular topic. We did this crazy webinar the other day. It was on a geography of an area. We know all of those people that are on that list now are interested in geography. So now how can we, geology. I always get those two mixed up. So geology. So how can we connect them to this volunteer that we have who happens to have a PhD in geology? So that to me is what's really changed. I really agree with what Carly is saying. Is it used to be you just you'd blast out your yearly message and you'd wait for the money to roll on in. And even in our messaging for like thank you notes, I do not want a super automated process for that. If somebody, even if it's a small donor now, we're writing personal, notes back to them, and really finding that that's a way for them to feel like they want to get to know us. And specifically, I'm one of the founders. My husband's the other founder. And, we were reminded that last night, this lady sat down. She was like, I've been following you guys for years. I feel like I know you. So all of our social media is about people getting to know not only what we do, but us. And that's a very different thing. So I go by Gravel Girl, and that works really, really well for us. I'll be somewhere and it's like, oh my God, that's Gravel Girl. I'm so excited to meet you. And it's really weird for me because it's not really who I am. I don't think in those terms, but creating that ability for people to get to know you personally and to get to know your mission.
Yeah, I think you both hit the nail on the head. We used to use this one size fits all messaging. Like you said, Linda, you'd send out your yearly blast and just wait for the money to roll on in. But it's not enough to have one touch point anymore, because that's not the world that we live in. It's so fast paced, and there is, all this modern communication. So people almost expect you to be in constant communication with them, right? You need the webinars, you need to send out the email blasts, you need the regular impact reporting. And that just puts so much more pressure on nonprofits to do more and more and more. And, they don't always have the staff or the bandwidth to do more and more and more. So there's just a lot of competing priorities in the mix. But even with all the competition, right, we still have to nail personalization. So it's right. How do you do that with everything else that's going on? And it leads us to our next question. I'm curious, just from both of your perspectives, what are the moments in the donor journey where personalization actually changes how a donor behaves and reacts? Like, what are those particular moments where it's not just they're hearing the message, but they're actually acting upon it? They're taking ownership in a way.
Mm-hmm. I just did a mid-level gift workshop a couple of weeks ago, and one of the stats we looked at was they did a split test between an organization that sent out handwritten notes with their mid-level giving and those that didn't. And the ones that did had a much higher retention and higher giving, which I know is like so simple. But it wasn't in the thank you, it was on the piece. So it was like a post-it note that was like, hey, Bob, like just wanted you to see this message, whatever, with the person's name. So obviously that's super personalized. It doesn't feel like a blasted out direct mail piece because someone wrote a note to you on it ahead of that. And that small thing saw higher gift retention. And so that's where I think, like, we can all talk about personalization, but when it changes our actual giving and retention of our donors, that's when it really matters. So that's kind of a small example, but like when one of those moments then makes the donor respond in a way that feels like there's a relationship there.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it's funny that you say that. That's very similar to our experience as well. I would say for us, it's if somebody has gone to an event, if we know that they have downloaded a route off of our website, so we know that is a point where we have got to figure out how we can have a very personalized message to them. So, for example, for us, if I know that you're going to go out and ride the Skydog route, because we know that you've been there, we're working on this membership model where we're going to be able to see that, and then I can send you a note that says, hey, how was that Skydog experience? And tell me about it, right? Can you leave a comment? It's not about me going out and asking them for money, but it's about me asking them to stay engaged with us. Suddenly that becomes a very, very different experience for them. Same thing if they go on a bike ride with us, right? That's a given. We're going to get money out of that for sure. But even webinars, we did a really simple webinar, which was the aging cyclist. We got this aging expert, and it was like December, so nobody's riding. It was terrible unless they happened to be in lovely Phoenix, Arizona. And right after that, we just got a whole bunch of checks, and it was so much more effective than the Giving Tuesday messaging that we sent out. I think everybody was so burned out on Giving Tuesday this year. It was like, oh my God, like one more nonprofit asked me for money. Where if we can break that out of that cycle, I look at it and I say, I'm trying to space things out throughout the year. But really, it's when am I close to that person? When are they really thinking about me? When are they receiving direct messaging from me? Now it's how can I craft a message that will get them to think about donating?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. All good points. And like we talked about before, it's challenging. It's tricky to scale donor personalization. It's really an art. From your experience, where does the breakdown usually happen? Is it the data, the workflow, ownership, tech? Not every nonprofit is nailing personalization. So where is the difficulty, the initial point of difficulty, I should say?
When I saw this question, I was like, D, all of the above.
Yeah. All at once.
Yeah. Data, workflow, ownership, or tech. And And when I was thinking about it, I was thinking it actually doesn't matter where it breaks down. You as a fundraiser should choose to own it. I know when I was in the fundraising space, no one owned our database. It was just kind of like a thing that like nobody wanted to touch. And so I was like, I talk about this a lot. I was a rookie, and so I was super green, and I was like, I'll own it. It's not like, why does nobody want to own this? And so I just leaned in and was like, I'm going to do this. So that's why I'm saying, like, it doesn't matter. Like, choose to be the owner if no one is, and choose to fix the data, the workflow, and the technology. Because I do feel like ownership is probably where I would say that the issue starts, is if you have no idea who owns it or no one owns it, then nothing is going to happen.
No.
So if no one owns it, choose to own it, and figure out, well, what does that look like? How can I start small from personalization to, do I need to change my technology because we want to get, even more advanced from personalization at scale?
I feel so unsophisticated. We're a very small nonprofit, so a lot of our personalization comes from me getting a message that says, oh, you just received this donation. I'm like, oh, I know Fred. Here, let me just drop him a note, right? And so a lot of that. It's really interesting though, as you grow. Now all of a sudden, I'm going out of my mind of saying, okay, we've got to start looking at these processes and making them easier for me and for the rest of the team. So, and we don't have a very big team, so in some ways it's easy to coordinate because I can talk to two other people and okay, what are you guys doing? Oh yeah, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But as we're growing, it's getting much, much more difficult to keep track of all of these people. And so I agree with you. It breaks down all the time in all sorts of different places. You're sort of playing whack-a-mole of saying, okay, like last year, all of a sudden I realized like we had never done anything to thank big donors. I mean, what an idiot, like I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. And yet, I went to those big donors and then they were like, oh, yeah, it's nice to hear from you. Like they were so excited to hear from us when I reached out to them. And so it's really easy to do stupid things like that. But you only have so many hours in the day. So.
Yeah. And I'll just add, like, I worked at a $30 million nonprofit, so it may be different, but like these breakdowns happen across the board, whether it's a smaller nonprofit, middle, large. Like sometimes I think even we would look to a bigger nonprofit and be like, they have it all figured out. But no, they have the same amount of breakdowns. And honestly, the more you add more people, like the more complicated it gets when it comes to ownership and workflows and technology and all that.
Yeah, all very good points. And, in theory, right, adding more people should make it so much easier, but then you have to be in communication with more people and make sure that everyone is on top of what they're supposed to be doing and, executing on it correctly. So it does complicate things no matter what level you're at in the nonprofit space. In terms of solutions to some of these pain points, like taking ownership, or if you're small and you're going through those growing pains right now of trying to make your data more sophisticated or have those processes create that workflow, what are some digital technology solutions that can help these nonprofits of all sizes scale their personalization efforts?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were kind of chatting about this before this started, but I think all the talk of AI right now can be based in a lot of fear, but also it's a really great tool to use to actually do what we're talking about here, which is scale personalized communication with the goal of keeping the human things the most authentic. Because if you're sending out AI slop, you're not making anything more human or more authentic. Obviously, I work at Virtuous, so we use technology to do this now. But one of the tools we have that didn't exist when I was a customer, but is the one I would have been the most excited about, is it scrapes all of your CRM donor data, like all the notes that you make about the donor, and it generates copy for you to send in an email or even talking points for a phone call. So you don't have to go through and be like, what's the kid's name and what's the dog's name and what's the last thing we talked about? Like it summarizes that and then you can edit it before it goes out. But that's where it's like, it does that manual work for you so that then you can have the really authentic conversation. So whether you're using a tool like Virtuous to do that, or you're using ChatGPT or, whatever it is, like use the technology to automate that manual work so that you can keep the human conversation authentic, because that's why donors give, because of that relationship. They're not going to give if they feel like they're talking to a robot that's, sending them an email.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on the AI slop. You have to be really careful with it, but it can also be really powerful. We were talking about how, I can take same messaging and I can plug it in and say, this is what I need. And then it's going to kick it back to me. And sometimes it's really off and sometimes it's great, but I need to pay attention to that. I got caught up the other day in something where AI, imagined something and put something in there. And I was like, oh my God, this is totally wrong. And so being really, really cautious with that, of not overusing it and everything just sounding so. AI can sound really, really bland after a while. It's just like it starts saying a lot of nothing. Like it all sounds good, but it's nothingness.
Yeah.
Is what. So I'm always trying to say, I don't want to waste my donors' time. And so I'm making sure that our messaging is still very, very crisp. And then there's times when I just say screw it and I write things myself. And our whole website has always been based off of my voice. And it's a voice that AI for some reason doesn't seem to be able to replicate that. And I know that our followers really, really appreciate that about us, that of just being really, goofy and unexpected and hey, let's have fun. And this is all about cycling and we're really psyched about it. And so I think that's part of it too.
Yeah, I'll give a note just on that for a second. I worked at an organization that had a CEO that was like the forward face as well. AI didn't really exist when I worked there. Like ChatGPT was very new. But I absolutely would have made like a custom GPT and load in all of the media, anything he had written, like podcasts, anything like that to get closer to his voice. Because what took so much time, especially at a larger organization, is like getting that person to review everything constantly can create a bottleneck. So if you can get closer to that tone, even if they need to review it, at least they're reviewing something that feels closer instead of feeling like they have to rewrite the whole thing. So that's another example where you can feel like you're just moving away from the like AI slop and blandness and trying to like get some personality in it.
Yeah, I really like that idea. It's a great idea, and we have played around with that. It hasn't quite worked the way that we wanted to. I guess and some of the feedback is part of what I think makes us authentic is it depends on what mood I'm in as to how I'm writing out. And so sometimes I'm very like structural, and other times I'm like goofy and silly. And we've gotten feedback. People like that. And so AI will tend to want to put it all in the same tone. And it's like, okay, no, we don't want to do that. So probably using two different chatbots of saying, okay, here we go. We're going to use this one day, and that one might be a solution. I don't know. We just need to play more with it.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I also need to tell AI to put in some spelling errors, and then that way people will know that like a human wrote it. Because when I see a spelling error, I'm like, oh, I saw that in an email recently. I'm like, oh my gosh, he wrote this email himself. Like, that's so great.
No, isn't it sad that it's come to that where please insert grammatical mistakes, and the journalist in me is crying when I see things like this, or I'm like, oh, I know a human wrote it because I see a spelling error. But I think you all touched on really important points where automation is important, but you have to balance that with the human component, because at the end of the day, people are donating to nonprofits because humans are running them. They care about the people who are making good things happen in the world. And a lot of that good comes through storytelling, right? Like Linda, you have a very strong voice and tone. And so people know it's you when they're reading a piece of communication. And that's really special because they know that you wrote it, in your goofy, fun tone of voice, or in like your more serious hat, and that's important to not lose that authenticity. So it's a delicate balance. And I'm sure these conversations are going to continue to evolve as AI gets more sophisticated, and we'll, keep figuring out how to use it efficiently, and also with maintaining credibility as well.
Absolutely.
And Linda, I know you created a digital report recently for Dirty Freehub. I'd actually like to take some time now and pull it up, give you an opportunity to walk us through a few sections of that report. because it's digital, right? It's not the static print reports that you've seen in the past. You have the ability to constantly update this if you want to just send out a link. You didn't have to spend X amount of dollars printing it. So there are a lot of pros to having a digital report. And if you want to start from the beginning and again take us through a few sections, we don't have to go through the whole piece, but any highlights that you want to point out and how it helped your organization.
Right. Well, first off, I want to talk a little bit about how we approach an impact report, because I think that's actually even more important than what's in our impact report. The way that we view our impact report is, first off, I don't start with who am I writing this impact report. You can scan through it. It's all good. But for us, this is an internal process, right? And so we really start with that. And we go back to, we have 4 key social missions, and we start with those and we say, okay, how are we doing with economic development for, rural areas? How are we doing with getting people out to ride a bike? How are we doing? So that's where we start. And this starts probably, I would say 4 months before we're even thinking about publishing this impact report. Okay. So then from there, after we get to that, now we start crafting, and then we're looking at doing our planning for next year. So we're not thinking about publishing yet. We're talking about this internal process of saying, how are we impacting people today? Do we want to change our social missions? What are we going to be doing next year? So this is a really, couple of month process. We go out, we survey our customers. We want to know what they think of us. We do this big, huge survey. And we get all of that back. And now we say, okay, now how do we tell our story to somebody who could be in a couple of different groups? So we look at our impact report gets read by the tourism industry. It gets read by our individual donors and by bike shops. And so those are 3 very, very different users who are going to want to know what impact we're having. And so one group really cares about our financials. Another group could care less. So that's to me is the purpose of the impact report, is that for me, it's internal. It forces us to get really crisp on what we're doing. Why are we doing it? Are we being successful? And then it forces us to tell our story out to these 3 different audiences that we're trying to communicate with. It's been hugely popular. People love the format of this. And we really do like your product. For me, at first, I was kind of like, oh my gosh, we're going to pay, whatever for a tool. And I'm like, do we really have to pay that much? Can't we just shove it into, PowerPoint or whatever? But this format has been, every time somebody gets our impact report, they just look at it and they go, oh my God, this is great. This really does help us understand your organization.
Oh, great. I'm really glad to hear that. And I, not to tout Storyraise, but I think that is one of the perks, is that, you're able to give this piece of communication to multiple audiences who, you're not necessarily speaking to them in the same exact way, but you can deliver a digital report that's personalized for them. And you don't have to print, X amount of copies of that report. And then also, once that report is printed, right, you have no idea where it goes. People can be chucking it in the trash. Maybe it's collecting dust on their desk or like shoved in their briefcase. You don't know. But with this type of digital report, you can track and see, who's spending how much time on this one section. Are they clicking on the link to this button? Like, you can actually see their engagement in real time, which is, I think, the way of the future here, and knowing how donors are connecting to what we're saying.
So really quick, one of the ways that we use it a lot is in our grant writing. Instead of recreating all this stuff that we know the grantees is looking for, we put it in our impact report, so that now we're referencing them back to our impact report. And what's nice about that is a lot of times these organizations don't really understand what we do. So now we've got them going through our impact report. We really, really like that. We also are starting to play around with, when somebody donates money, usually they haven't read our impact report. I'm always surprised by that. We always think, oh, they've donated money, okay, they've probably read their impact report. Not the case. And so one of our messages back to the donor is, it's so nice that you donated, X amount of money. If you have any questions, here's how we're utilizing your funding to make an impact, right? And that people have really gotten into and liked a lot.
Great. Great. I know we have to close out in just a moment, so I want to give you all the floor one more time to just leave our viewers with a little takeaway. If there's anything that you want them to walk away with and to keep at the forefront as they're going through, the challenges and the successes of personalization. Carly, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I guess I would say, like the nonprofits who succeed going forward are the ones who are going to create authentic relationships, especially at scale. So I know when I was working in this space, sometimes it was very much like, we just got to get things out. We got to get the newsletter out. We got to get the appeal out. We got to get but it's like those who pause and say, well, what would it look like to do something more personalized? Maybe we do a more personalized thing and we get rid of these 3 communications and do something more personalized. Like this is the time to rethink and figure out what that would look like and test, because again, that's what's going to keep your donor connected to you, not the mass amount of appeals you're going to get out.
100%. Linda?
I would just like to say messaging is hard. We've been in this game for like 10, 12 years, I think 12 years at this point. It took me a long time to realize it was just, in some ways it was so repetitive. It was about telling the story over and over and over and over until I thought I was going to go out of my mind. So if you feel like it's hard, you're right. It is really hard. But what's really interesting is when I go someplace now and people are like, "Oh, you're with Dirty Freehub," and they just start talking to me like we're Nike, and I just start laughing because I go, we're this teeny tiny little organization in Oregon. But it's really fun, and it does pay off, if people can understand your brand. There's a lot of confusion around your brand. You can always think like, oh my gosh, it's so obvious what we do. And how many times, even people on our board, where I'll say the other day, one of our board members, I was like, here, give a pitch of our organization. And I was just horrified, quite frankly. So messaging is really, really important. And I love the idea of personalized messaging. And I do think that it is the future. But again, it's tricky and it's hard, and good luck with it. And let me know if you have any great ideas.
Amazing. Great. Thank you both. Carly, Linda, thank you for a great conversation. We appreciate your time and your insights. To learn more about Virtuous's work, click on the link in the LinkedIn live chat. It'll be posted in just a moment. And again, if you'd like a sample of a personalized digital report made for your very own nonprofit, you can click the link in the chat and our report generator will make one for you. We encourage you to check out Storyraise and start creating your own reports and videos to help you scale your donor engagement. If you have any questions about Storyraise or anything we discussed during our webinar today, you can reach out to me at shauna@storyraise.com. We're so glad you all could join us for this installment of Boost. Stay tuned for our next session on April 8th. We'll have experts from version 2 AI with us to talk about how healthcare foundations can personalize and increase their donor engagement. And I'll see you all next time. Thanks again, Carly, Linda. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.